Hey everyone, Heero here, and today we're gonna look at Fufu, a stunner that relies on her special chain attack and off-field auto attacks to stun enemies to help allies deal big PP damage. I'll be discussing her kit, builds, wenjins, and possible themes. Just as a quick disclaimer though, the footage and information that will be shown is from the Creator Experience server, so things can still change when her banner drops. Let's start by discussing her basic attack, Wu-Wei, because it's what enables Fufu's off-field stunning capabilities. It takes the form of Fufu's ball that automatically attacks enemies whether she's on or off-field. And every time it hits an enemy, it provides 20 points of might, which is indicated by the bar underneath Fufu's icon. And these points of might are required to launch her second chain attack, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's also worth noting that similar to Lighter, she also has an infinite basic attack combo you can do just by spamming the attack button. This is pretty useful if you ever need to on-field her to stack buffs for certain wenjins, deal a bit of extra days, or build energy for EX specials. But speaking of which, let's talk about her EX special and ult, since they're essentially the same skill, with her ult just being way stronger. They're both high days dealing attacks, with her EX specials giving 80 points of might, while her ult gives 100. And they also give something called momentum, with her EX special giving 3 stacks, while her ult gives 6. Momentum is indicated by the fist buff icon under Fufu, with it only having a max of 15 stacks, and the only way to get it is by using her EX special, ult, or assist follow-up. Now, she also has a unique dash attack where she starts spinning like a Beyblade by holding the attack button after a dash attack. But here's where momentum comes in. If you have at least 1 point of momentum, it enhances her dash attack by allowing it to deal fire damage, turning her into a fire Beyblade. Just note, each time Fufu hits an enemy with this attack, it consumes 1 momentum, and if there's no more momentum stacks, the state ends. But there are 2 neat things about this skill. First, if you switch to another unit while the skill is active, Fufu will continue to attack the enemy until she consumes her momentum stacks. And second, each hit of the attack gives you 25 points of might, and if you have at least 100, hitting an enemy with a fire Beyblade will automatically trigger her special chain attack. But speaking of which, she has a second unique chain attack. And like I said earlier, this skill does require you to have at least 100 might to use, with you gaining might through her Wu-Wei auto attacks, ult, EX special, and the fire Beyblade enhanced dash attack. But the neat thing is, if you have momentum stacks, using this chain attack will put her straight into the fire Beyblade enhanced dash attack. However, moving on to her core passive, since it's what ties all her abilities together. Aside from enabling Wu-Wei auto attacks to be used off-field, it also allows it to trigger her special chain attack on hit if Fufu has 100 might. Now overall, her core passive is what enables Fufu's off-field stunning capabilities, since it allows her to launch most of her high days building abilities automatically off-field, giving more field time to your DPSs without you having to do anything special. Her core passive also gives a unique point-wide buff named Tiger's Roar whenever her chain attack hits an enemy, with the buff increasing chain attack damage by 20%, ult damage by 40%, and Fufu's impact by 50. But the neat thing is, it also gives a 20% crit damage buff that increases by 5% for every 100 attack above 2,800, for a total crit damage buff of 50%. However, in order to get the full buff, she needs at least 3,400 attack minimum, which is a bit difficult since there aren't a lot of stunner wenjins that give attack, and it only considers her out of battle attack stat, so in-combat attack buffs won't help her. Now, moving on to her additional ability, which needs an attack or rupture unit to activate. It's a fairly simple ability that increases max decibels for every squad member by 1,000, for a total of 4,000 max decibels. Just note, this does not increase the amount of decibels needed to ult. You can still use ults with only 3,000 decibels. And lastly, it refunds 300 decibels to rupture or attack agents whenever they use their ults, which can help launch ults more often in longer stages like Deadly Assault. But with her kit out of the way, let's talk about her Mindscapes. Her M1 gives Fufu a permanent 12% crit rate buff and 100 might at the start of battle, while enabling her chain attacks to increase stun damage multipliers for stunned enemies by 35% for 30 seconds. So in total, with this Mindscape, Fufu will now have 31.4% crit rate without any substats. But aside from this, its bonus stun damage multipliers gives her a similar support utility to Lycon and Chingy for boosting overall team damage. Her M2 allows her Tiger's Roar buff to give an additional 22% crit damage, and whenever any character uses an ult, it also gives Fufu 3 momentum. This increases Fufu's max crit damage buff from 50% all the way to a whopping 72%, which is one of, if not the highest crit damage buff in the game. However, aside from this, it also allows her to use her enhanced dash attacks more often, especially in teams that ult a lot like Yichuan teams. While her M4 allows her Tiger's Roar buff to increase Fufu's personal crit damage by 35%, which is neat for getting a bit more damage out of her. And finally, her M6 buffs Fufu's chain attack by 30%, and when consuming momentum during her enhanced dash attack, he fires 3 projectiles that deal 160% of her attack as damage and are considered as chain attacks. Essentially, this is just more Fufu damage, which pretty much enables her to become a more effective stunner with sub-DPS levels of damage. And with her Mindscapes out of the way, let's talk about her possible vengeance. Fufu's signature gives it 30% attack with its main stat, while having a high 713 base attack. It also buffs the days dealt by her EX specials, chain attack, and ult by 28%. And finally, because her chain attack and ult deals fire damage, every time you use it, it buffs the party's damage by 10%, stacking up to 2 times for 30 seconds. This Wenjin gives a 20% damage buff in total that will pretty much have permanent uptime since Fufu chain attacks pretty often. But the more important thing is that it's one of the only stunner Wenjins that gives attack with its main stat, which of course makes it so much easier to get to 3400 attack. Lighter signature is a good alternative, giving her up to 43% impact for faster stuns while allowing her basic attacks to buff fire and ice crit damage by up to 30%. Just note, you'll have to on-field Fufu for her infinite basic attack combo to get its full stacks faster. But after that, her Hu-Wei auto attacks should be able to keep full uptime on its buffs on a boss. Coletta's Hellfire Gears is also a pretty great option as well. Not only does it give tons of impact, but it also gives quite a bit of energy regen. This enables Fufu to use her EX specials more often to gain momentum for her Fire Beyblade attack. And as usual, Steam Oven is a good general use free-to-play option. It can give up to 25.6% impact from its passive as long as you accumulate enough energy. And because of its ER bonus, it also allows her to use her EX specials more often, meaning more momentum stacks for her enhanced dash attacks. Fossilized Core is also good, with it giving 15% impact and buffing the amount of days she deals by 32%, which is one of the biggest days bonuses she can get against enemies above 50% HP, making it a very good choice for Deadly Assault. But with possible vengeance out of the way, let's talk about drive discs. For the 4-piece set, her best option is the new King of the Summit set. It buffs days by 6% and gives a 15% team-wide crit damage buff after using an EX special or chain attack. But if she has at least 50% crit rate, it gives a 30% crit damage buff instead. Now, this is her best set for supportive utility. However, it makes her harder to build, because not only does she have to reach 3.4k attack, she'll also have to reach 50% crit rate. So you might have to run a crit rate main stat instead of attack if you want to run this set. As for the 2-piece set, Astral Voice or Hormone Punk is the best if you still need to reach 3.4k attack. However, if you've already reached 3.4k attack, Woodpecker is also a decent option if you still need to reach 50% crit rate for the Summit set. But if you've already met those stat requirements, you can just run Shockstar Disco to buff her days build up even further. But with her possible drive discs out of the way, let's talk about stats. For main stats, you want crit rate or attack for slot 4, attack on slot 5, and attack or impact on slot 6. Now, as much as possible, you want to equip attack percent main stats to meet her core passive's attack threshold. But the crit slot 4 is also good for helping reach 50% crit rate for the Summit set, and only use impact for slot 6 if you've already met her attack goal. For substats, you mainly want to focus on attack first, then crit rate, then flat attack, and finally crit damage. Now first of all, she needs 50% crit rate if you're running the King of the Summit set, but luckily she has 19.4% crit rate from her kit, so she'll only need 6.6% crit rate if you're running a crit rate slot 6, and 30.6% if you're not. And lastly, she needs to reach a minimum of 3.4k attack to get her full 50% crit damage buff. And the amount of attack substats needed to reach this heavily depends on the setup you're running. So here's a table showing how much attack substat rolls you'll need with some of your setups. Keep in mind, an attack percent roll is always equal to 3%, and having flat attack substats would lower the number of needed attack percent rolls. And as you can see, having her signature definitely makes it so much easier to reach 3.4k attack. But if you don't plan to roll for it, as much as possible, try to run 2 attack main stats and Hormone Punk as the 2-piece, cause otherwise it would be borderline impossible to reach 3.4k attack. But honestly, seeing how difficult it is to reach 3.4k attack with some of your setups, just get as much attack as you can. Missing 5 to 10% crit damage from her passive wouldn't really cause too big of a damage drop-off. With her stats out of the way, let's talk about possible teammates. Now, before we cook up some teams, just note, you'll need one of the characters shown in screen to activate her additional ability. And as usual, just pick a Bang Boo that would suit the party. Fufu can pretty much perform her role as an off-field stunner effectively for most attack and rupture characters in the game, with her best supporting on-field DPSs like Yixuan and Evelyn. With her off-field stunning capabilities combined with her ult, chain attack, and crit damage buff, not only giving more field time to these DPSs to build their resource meters, but it also allows them to deal quite a bit more damage due to the damage buffs. But with that being said, Yixuan is the best DPS to run her with. Not only does Fufu provide Yixuan with more field time to dish out combos and build her technique points, Fufu's crit damage and ult damage buffs also greatly benefit Yixuan due to her ult being a big part of her damage output. And the cool thing is, Yixuan can take more advantage of Fufu's Decibel Refund upon ulting, cause you can use her technique point ult very often, essentially allowing you to get her Decibel ult way faster. Now Fufu would take the place of Yixuan's stunner in hyper carry teams, replacing units like Trigger, Koleda, or Qingyi, and ran alongside supports like Pan Yin-Hu, Caesar, or Astra Yao. And due to how much damage Fufu enables for Yixuan, the best Yixuan comps will always contain Fufu to make what I believe to be one of the best teams currently in the game, being able to clear most content with ease. But another very notable DPS to run with her is Evelyn. She greatly benefits from the increased field time, 20% chain attack damage buff, and more stuns from Fufu, allowing her to spam more high damage chain attacks. Now, Fufu would end up taking the place of her primary stunner in hyper carry Evelyn teams as an alternative to Trigger or Lighter. But you also have an option of running Fufu together with the stunners I just mentioned in a double stunner comp that provides a lot of stuns for Evelyn to spam more chain attacks. And either way you do so, these comps should be able to clear most content no problem. You can also run her pretty well with Ellen, with her benefiting greatly from Fufu's crit damage, chain attack, and ult damage buffs. This is due to our Nom Nom Shark's recent buff, making her ult and chain attacks contribute a ton to her overall damage output. You can use her in an Ellen double stunner team, with her being the secondary stunner alongside Lighter or Lycon in a more burst damage playstyle. But if you have neither of them, you can always just run a hyper carry on-field Ellen with Fufu as the main stunner and the support of your choice. And either way you decide to do so, these comps should be able to clear content no problem. You can also run Fufu with S11, with S11 benefiting greatly from Fufu giving bonus crit damage and field time. They can work together in a double stunner team with Lighter or Trigger, or the standard hyper carry team with a support like Astra Yao. And you can also use her as the main stunner in Soldier Zero and B teams. But just note, Sanbi doesn't benefit as much from Fufu's ult and chain attack buffs as compared to other DPSs due to her main damage source being Aftershocks. But Sanbi does still benefit from Fufu's crit damage buff and her giving Sanbi more field time to build her Silver Star meter. And lastly, Fufu also works with Hugo, with her buffing his ult's totalized damage while also buffing Hugo's double chain attack combo. But sadly, only Fufu's crit damage buff affects the totalize from Hugo's EX special, which unfortunately is the one he uses more often. Now for Hugo teams, you want to run Fufu alongside either Lighter, Qingyi, Lycon, or even Anbi if you're on a budget. But generally, Fufu's role in this team would be to help your primary stunner stun enemies faster while she's off-field to help Hugo spam more totalizes. But the neat thing is, Fufu has no trouble helping any Hugo team clear endgame content. Now, here's a chart comparing the performance of every Fufu team I tried in Deadly Assault. Keep in mind, every S-rank agent is at M0, and every A-rank agent is at M6, and all of them except for Astra Yao had their signatures. But with that in mind, the scores you see here are due to many variables like my skill issue, so they are bound to change depending on your skill level, team builds, engines, and more. But it should still give a good idea on how each team compared to each other. But that's about it because I'm beginning to lose my voice. But there's just one last question. Is she a must-pull? Well, as usual, it depends on your account. She's not really a must-pull if you already have stunners like Lighter, Chingy, Trigger, or an M6 Pulcra, and are satisfied with their performance in supporting your party. In this case, it's so much better to roll for someone that would benefit your account more or a character you like. We recently got trip marketing for Alice and Yuzuha, so they might interest you more. But if not, the rest of the 2.x characters are on the way, so saving might not be a bad idea. However, Fufu is definitely a must-pull if you're needing a good stunner. She's a very simple unit with unique mechanics who can enable a lot of DPSs to deal more damage thanks to the buffs and increased field time she provides. You can run her as a stunner in most attack or rupture agent teams, and she'll be able to support your DPS and clearing any endgame content just fine, making her a pretty versatile character. And the neat thing is, as an off-field stunner, she could be pretty useful for future on-field DPSs, especially if their main damage source is either chain attacks or ults. But at the end of the day though, if you like Fufu, pull for her, and if you don't, well don't. Personally, I'm gonna have to skip, cause each one took all my savings, and I wanna save for both Alice and Yuzuha. I mean, look just how adorable they are. But make sure to tell me what you think about her in the comments below, and don't forget to hit me with a like and a sub. Now, onto the showcases. Hopefully you enjoy, and please forgive my skill issue, I'm actually terrible at this game.